Pastor asked the question, and Stephen was the lone person up there. I kind of felt I wanted to join him so we wouldn't be so alone. What are you afraid of? Well, this is a little bit intimidating. I mean, the bishop was here last week, and now I'm standing here. So a little bit nervous, a little bit afraid, but I know I've got a great group of folks out there pulling for me. The reason I'm up here is because next Sunday is our Time and Talents event. It's that second and third part of stewardship, the 3 T's. We talk about treasure separately. We have Consecration Sunday in the fourth quarter of each year. But today and next week, we're going to take time to reflect on our God-given talents, and we'll have an opportunity to indicate which areas of service that we want to be able to help provide, volunteer for in the coming year. Excuse me. Well, several years ago, the Stewardship Committee wanted to place emphasis not just on the money aspect of stewardship. So Time and Talents has been given its separate day, and that day is next Sunday. This started out to be a temple talk, and as the Stewardship Committee talked about it, we felt that a sermon would be appropriate, or a message to follow that. This is going to be the temple talk part of that. Now, typically you get a card and there's a whole list of talents on there, and you go ahead and check the box, you sign it, put it in the box, and that's it. We've made a subtle but important distinction for this year. Instead of just listing all those different talents on there, different volunteer needs, we've actually created white space on there. And that's for you to actually write in your talent there. Write in what you want to volunteer for. I know it's a subtle difference, but I think it's going to take maybe a little bit more thought, a little bit more commitment to go ahead and do that. And I don't care if you put only one item on there. That's fine. One item is fine, as long as you commit to do that one item when that call comes or that need arises. So that's the big difference in this year's card. You're going to see that next week when they hand them out for the first time. Now, if you're unsure how to respond to this call, I think Jesus Christ himself gave us the best advice in this parable of the talents. And let me paraphrase Jesus' story from Matthew 25. I'm sure you remember how a certain master was going away, and he summoned 3 of his servants, and to one he gave 5 talents, another 2, and another 1. And he didn't give them any further instructions on how to use them. Didn't tell them to invest, didn't tell them to go online and trade, didn't tell them to do any of those things, okay? So these 3 people walk away with their talents. Well, the master comes back and he summons the 3 servants and he wants an accounting of how they did. We know how the first 2 invested their talents and actually doubled the return on that investment, and was very pleasing to the master. But the servant that had only 1 talent simply buried it, returned it to the master unused. And Jesus said, to that person, he was very disappointed, and in fact sent that person away, punished that person. And I don't know about you, but those words felt a little bit like a stinging rebuke to me, because I know that there's talents that I have buried, that I'm not using, that I ignore boxes, that I know I could do something and I come up with my own excuse that I don't have enough time, or I'm already doing this, or I'm already doing that. I can think of no better way to illustrate an unused talent and the potential we all possess in a simple story I'm going to tell you about an elementary school teacher by the name of Miss Tompkins. Now, Miss Tompkins was a very good teacher, don't get me wrong. I mean, she knew her reading, writing, arithmetic, and all the other courses as well as anybody, and she taught with passion. And when she graded her paper, she did it with flair and gusto. She had one of those pencils, I haven't seen one in a long time, it was blue on one side and red on the other. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Well, I see a few heads of nodding affirmation there. Well, the red part was always like really short, the blue part was really long. I'm sure she had to throw away the pencil before the blue ever got used, because when she graded paper, she put a big red X against the wrong answers. And if the paper was a failing paper, there was a big F. And if a student happened to get an A or a B, it was kind of like that small. But she would use the full margin on the top of the paper to okay, you need to shape up. You need to get better. You need to improve. Well, and when she graded or returned those graded papers, she would like to walk up and down the rows, calling out the students' names. Ken. And then she would flip that paper in what I call a helicopter fashion. That paper would go across the tabletop, the desktop, and the kids would be left kind of scrambling, hoping they could get onto that paper before it would go on the floor. Because if you had a D or an F, and it fell on the paper, you were mortified. You'd go out there at lunchtime, and the kids, oh, fine, you got a D on that paper, you got an F on that paper, and nobody wanted to do that. So they were always afraid that when she handed those papers back, that exercise, they didn't realize gym class was part of just simply getting your grade back. Now, if you asked her, she would tell you that she really loved her students, and she treated them all equally. But deep down inside, that wasn't true. And she had one student this year in her 6th grade class by the name of Teddy Staller. And he would qualify as one of those kids that Miss Tompkins he was hard to like. He came to school with a deadpan face. He seemed uninterested in any of the things that she felt passionate about. Showed little interest in any school activities whatsoever. And she took a great pleasure in grading his papers with a big, that F had a cursive look to it. I mean, it was beautiful. But she should have known better because she had Teddy's records from his previous years. In his early years, he was a good student, above average in the earlier grades. But his mom took sick about 3 years ago. And in fact, she passed away 2 summers ago. And the father, unfortunately, showed little interest in any school activities. Never came to school functions, never came to any parent-teacher meetings. Well, the school year passed until it was the day before Christmas break. Many of the kids brought in colorful gifts or gift cards, and they piled them high on Miss Tompkins' desk. And just before class was going to be dismissed early and all the kids head out for their vacation, she called them all up around her desk. She opened the gifts one by one. There was a gift card from Dunkin' Donuts, a gift card from the Olive Garden, the teacher plaque that says, "My favorite teacher." You know, you always got, one of those kids in class that their mom, thinks they're going to butter the teacher up a little bit. Well, there's one gift left, and it's Teddy's. It's wrapped in brown paper, and it's just tied together with a piece of string, sort of in a shoelace fashion. As Miss Tompkins goes to pick it up, the gift just sort of falls apart. And out falls a badly tarnished Pandora bracelet with just a couple of charms on it. And then a half-used bottle of a dollar store perfume. The price tag was still on it. Well, the kids started to laugh and they giggled, but Miss Tompkins at least had the presence of mind to put on that bracelet and say, "Isn't it lovely?" And take a little bit of that perfume and just sort of spritz it on her wrist. And she held it up for the kids, and those giggles turned into oohs and ahs. Well, the bell rang, and all the kids in a chorus of "Merry Christmas, see you later" took off. And Miss Tompkins herself was in a hurry. She was gathering up all the gifts and putting them in her bag. She had a faculty party to go to. And she looked up and happened to see Teddy standing in the doorway. Well, this was a little bit irritating for her because she had a faculty party to go to, and she kind of responded back to him in a way that wasn't the kindest. She just, in an irritated fashion, said, "Teddy, did you miss the bus? What are you still doing here?" Well, he just kind of walks up to her, hands in pockets, up to her desk, and says, "Miss Tompkins, you smell just like that. And that bracelet, it looks lovely on you. You see that charm that says Mom? Well, I bought that for her just before, well, Well, she wanted to say thank you or something, but the lump in her throat prevented it. And Teddy quickly left the room. Well, being a Christian woman, Miss Tompkins did the only thing that she could at that point. She dropped to her knees there at her desk and sought forgiveness. She didn't care if anybody walked by or anybody saw her. She had seen her life in the way she had treated her students for the first time. And I'll tell you what, when the students returned from their Christmas vacation 2 weeks later, they were greeted by a brand new teacher. Miss Tompkins didn't have a new dress. She hadn't even changed her hair. But I'll tell you what, if you ask those kids, they said her face shone like an angel. Now, at recess, some of the kids said, "Geez, I wonder if Miss Tompkins was visited by 3 spirits, like Ebenezer Scrooge." And others said, "Well, "Oh, I saw the Grinch over Christmas," and they said the Grinch's heart grew 3 times that day when he realized what the true meaning of Christmas was. But she hadn't done any of that, okay? We know the story behind the scenes. Miss Tompkins had realized the error of her ways, had apologized, and felt not such a heavy, oppressive need to teach, but rather to instruct and to help. And she helped Teddy the rest of that year to the point where he got better than half of the students in the class, and all the other ones too improved in their grades as well. Well, from that moment, Miss Tompkins was the best teacher that any student could have ever had. She didn't stop there. Each subsequent class was treated in the same way. After that school year ended, she didn't hear from Teddy or see him for a long time. And one day she got a letter, and it read, "Dear Miss Tompkins, high school has been hard, but I really enjoyed learning. They tell me I finished second in my class. Salutatorian, they call it. I even get to give a short speech during graduation ceremonies. Did you ever think I would be doing that someday? I wanted you to be the first to know. Love, Teddy Stoller." Well, 4 years later, another letter from Teddy arrived, and it read, similar to the first, "Dear Miss Tompkins, the university has been tough, but I took to my studies like a fish out of water, graduating #1 in my class. I can hardly believe it myself. And now it's off to medical school. I wanted you to be the first to know. Love, Teddy Stoller." And finally, several more years passed, and Miss Tompkins received another letter, and this one read, "Dear Miss Tompkins, medical school was a great experience, and now I begin my residency. From now on, I sign my letters, Dr. Theodore Stoller, MD. How about that? I just wanted you to be the first to know. Love, Teddy Stoller." Now I ask myself, do we have Teddy Stollers in our community, Monroe County, Hamilton Township? Absolutely. Is that young man or young woman possibly enrolled in our VBS or in our Sunday school, and it's the only place they ever hear about a loving God? Quite likely, I would say. And is there a member in our congregation who could be a Miss Tompkins to a hurting one? We have many like that already teaching our classes. Well, I hope next week when you complete your time and talents card, you think of this story and open up your heart. You never know when your simple gesture, how far it may go, or whom it will affect. But lest you think that today's message is only a call for teachers, please look over the full list. And I'd like to conclude with words of one of my favorite hymns that is a plea that asks for those sorts of volunteers. And it goes like this. It says, "Hark the voice of Jesus calling. Who will go and work today? The fields are white and harvest waiting. Who will bear the sheaves away? Loud and long the Master calls you. A rich reward he offers thee. Who will answer gladly saying, Here am I. Send me, send me." You don't have to sing like angels. You don't have to preach like Paul. But you can tell the love of Jesus. You can say he died for all. Maybe you cannot rouse the wicked with the judgments, dread alarms, but surely you can help lead the little children, the Savior's waiting arms. Let none hear you idly saying, "There's nothing I can do." All the multitudes are dying, and the Master calls for you. Take the task he gives you gladly. Let his work your pleasure be. Please answer quickly when he calls you. Here am I. Send me. Send me.